I was 8 when I realized my home wasn't like the others. Other kids in school talked about family dinners, trips to the park, bedtime stories. My house was different. My memories start with the sound of glass clinking, the smell of stale beer, and my mother's slurred voice calling my name. Most nights, the kitchen table was covered in bottles, empty ones on the floor, half-full ones on the counter. Sometimes my father was there, sometimes not. When he wasn't, my mother drank with strangers. I used to sit in the corner, knees pulled up, watching her laugh too loud at men I didn't know. When my father left for good, I thought maybe things would get better. Instead, a new man appeared, my stepfather. At first, he seemed normal. He smiled at me, bought me candy, told me he would take care of us. But within weeks, the truth showed itself. He drank just like my mother, maybe worse. The first time he hit me, I didn't even understand why. I had spilled a glass of water on the table. His face turned red, and before I could apologize, his hand came down across my cheek. My mother just sat there, silent, staring at the floor. That silence hurt more than the slap. From that day, I learned to read footsteps. I could tell who was walking through the door by the sound of their shoes. If it was light and steady, maybe it was safe. If it was heavy, uneven, dragging, I knew trouble was coming. I'd hide in my room, but hiding never worked for long. Nights were the worst. Fights broke out almost every evening. Shouting, things breaking, sometimes screams. I'd bury my head under the pillow praying it would stop. Sometimes the door would burst open and he'd stand there drunk, looking for something or someone to release his anger on. More often than not, that someone was me. As I grew older, I stopped waiting for peace. I started expecting the violence. It was only a matter of time. My stepfather's fists were as much a part of my childhood as the walls of that house. He had rules, but they changed depending on how drunk he was. One night, I was beaten for not finishing my dinner. The next, for speaking too loudly. Once, I got a beating for laughing while the TV was on. None of it made sense. That was the point. There was no way to win. I remember one night clearly. I was 10. It was late, maybe midnight. I was half asleep when the door slammed open. He stood there in the doorway, bottle in his hand, eyes glassy and unfocused. He mumbled something about me being lazy. I hadn't done anything, but that didn't matter. He grabbed me by the arm, dragged me out of bed, and hit me until I couldn't cry anymore. The next morning, I went to school with bruises under my shirt. Nobody asked questions. Maybe they didn't notice. Maybe they didn't want to. I sat in class staring at the board, wondering how many of the other kids had slept peacefully in their warm beds while I counted the seconds between his footsteps. Sometimes my mother tried to protect me. She'd step in, push him back, yell at him to stop. But more often, she stayed quiet, her eyes dull, as if she wasn't really there. The alcohol had taken her away too. She was in the same house, but not with me. That silence turned me cold. I stopped asking for help. I stopped crying where anyone could hear. I learned to take the hits, then patch myself up in the bathroom alone. That was my childhood. Bruises hidden under long sleeves and secrets hidden behind forced smiles. I was 11 when it reached the limit. That night started like so many others, shouting in the kitchen, bottles hitting the floor, my mother crying. I hid in my room, knees pulled to my chest, waiting for the sound of his steps. It came, heavy, uneven, closer. The door slammed open. He was drunk, angrier than usual. He accused me of stealing money. I hadn't. But denial didn't matter. He grabbed me by the collar, dragged me into the hallway, and threw me against the wall. My head rang before I could stand. His fist came down again. I remember the smell of alcohol on his breath, the weight of his hand around my neck. I thought he might kill me. My mother screamed, tried to pull him off, but he pushed her to the ground. For the first time, I fought back. I kicked, I scratched, I did anything to break free. Somehow, I slipped out of his grip and ran. Barefoot, I tore out of the house and down the street. The night was cold, the pavement rough under my feet, but I didn't stop. I ran until my lungs burned. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. That was the first time I thought about never coming back. After that night, everything changed. I couldn't just wait for the next beating. I started planning. I hid coins I found under furniture, saved scraps of food. At school, I asked quiet questions. Which roads led out of town? Where the trains went? My stepfather must have sensed it because he got worse, more unpredictable. He'd shout if I looked at him, strike if I moved too slow. My mother was sinking deeper into the bottle. She barely noticed me anymore. One evening, after another beating, I stared at the ceiling and made a decision. I'd leave. I didn't care where I ended up. Anywhere was safer than that house. I started sleeping with my shoes under the bed, a small bag packed with the few things I owned, a shirt, a piece of bread, and a photo of my real father before he left. I kept the bag hidden, waiting for the right night. That night came sooner than I expected. It was summer. The heat clung to the walls, the smell of alcohol heavy in the air. My stepfather came home late, already drunk. This time, he didn't shout. He just walked straight to my room. His eyes were empty, colder than I had ever seen. He pulled me out of bed and shoved me against the dresser. My mother stood in the doorway, swaying, holding a bottle. She said nothing. That silence was the last straw. I didn't fight back this time. I slipped past him, grabbed the bag I had hidden, and bolted out the door. He yelled after me but didn't follow. Maybe he was too drunk. Maybe he didn't care. I ran until the house was out of sight. Past the corner store, past the old church, all the way to the train tracks. I sat there until dawn, clutching my bag, shaking. I was 12 years old. I had no plan, no money, no idea what came next. But I knew one thing. I was never going back. That was the night my childhood ended for good. When I left that house, I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. Life outside wasn't safer, just different. The streets had their own dangers. For days, I slept wherever I could, behind dumpsters, on park benches, once in an abandoned shed near the tracks. The nights were the hardest. Every noise made me flinch. Footsteps, sirens, even the wind rattling a door. I was just a boy, 12 years old, but I felt 100. I survived on scraps, half-eaten sandwiches from trash bins, apples stolen from a market stall, bread crusts from kind strangers who didn't ask questions. Hunger taught me how low I could go and still keep moving. There were other kids like me, runaways, some younger, some older. We crossed paths sometimes, shared food, shared stories, but never trusted each other fully. Everyone was too broken to be safe. I avoided the police. I was terrified they'd drag me back to my stepfather. That thought kept me in the shadows, even when help might have been possible. One night, I wandered near the train station. A man selling tickets noticed me hanging around. He asked if I was lost. I lied, said I was waiting for someone. He didn't believe me, but he didn't press. Instead, he handed me a piece of bread. That small kindness felt bigger than anything I'd known in years. The streets became my home, but they also became my prison. I was free from him, yes, but freedom meant hunger, fear, and cold. Every night, I asked myself the same question: would I have been better off staying? And every morning, when the sun rose and I wasn't lying on the floor bleeding, I knew the answer was no. Now, decades later, when I sit here as an old man, I still carry that boy inside me. The one who learned to read footsteps, who hid bruises under long sleeves, who slept on cold benches instead of in his own bed. People ask me if I ever forgave my parents. My answer is simple: no. Forgiveness requires repentance, and they never gave it. My mother drowned herself in bottles until the end. My stepfather died the way he lived, angry and alone. But I didn't let their choices define me forever. I built a different life. Hard work, small victories, people I could actually trust. I married, raised children, gave them the home I never had. I wasn't perfect, but I swore one promise: never let my kids feel the fear I felt every single night of my childhood. Even now, when I look back, I don't see myself as a victim. I see myself as a survivor. The bruises faded, the hunger passed, but the lesson stayed. Pain taught me resilience. Loneliness taught me independence. And betrayal, the deepest kind, from the people who were supposed to love me, taught me to build my own kind of family, one built on loyalty, not blood. That's why I tell this story, not for pity, not for sympathy, but because there are others who lived through the same silence, the same shadows, the same locked doors and raised fists. If you're listening, know this: it doesn't end there. You can walk out that door, you can run, you can survive, and one day maybe you'll sit where I sit now, old, scarred, but alive. And you'll realize that surviving was the loudest revenge you could ever take. I am an old man now. My hair is gray, my body's slower, my hands shaky, but the memories, they are sharper than ever. People think time heals. It doesn't. Time only teaches you how to carry the weight without collapsing. I built a life far away from that house. I worked hard jobs, earned respect, had children, and gave them what I never had: safety. No bottles smashed on the floor, no fists breaking the silence at night, no fear in their eyes when the door creaked open. But make no mistake, the past never left me. Every raised voice, even in a crowded room, makes me flinch. Every time I hear glass shatter, I'm 8 years old again, standing barefoot on a dirty floor, waiting for the hit. That part of me never grew up. I don't tell this story for pity. I don't want anyone's tears. I tell it because silence is what kept me trapped for so long. I learned that the most dangerous thing in an abusive home isn't the fist. It's the silence. The silence of neighbors who pretend not to hear. The silence of teachers who don't ask. The silence of a mother who looks away. That silence almost killed me, but I walked away, barefoot, bruised, hungry, but alive. And staying alive became my only form of revenge. Every birthday I celebrated, every day I worked an honest job, every night I tucked my children into bed without fear. All of it was proof that I had beaten him. I don't forgive him. I never will. Forgiveness is not required for survival. What is required is strength, and sometimes stubbornness, to keep moving forward even when every part of you wants to stop. Now, when I sit with my grandchildren, I see their laughter, their freedom, And I know the cycle ended with me. That's the only victory that matters. My stepfather is gone, my mother is gone, but I am still here, stronger than the house that tried to break me. And if you take anything from my story, let it be this. No matter how dark your home feels, no matter how heavy the silence gets, there is always a way out. You may leave with nothing, but nothing is still better than chain. I was just a boy when my childhood was stolen, but I became a man who took it back, piece by piece, and I will carry that truth to my last breath.